Hello everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 and welcome to another edition of the Stargirl Season 3 review series. And today I am going to be talking about Episode 4, Frenemies Chapter 4, The Evidence, which I have just finished watching. And this episode was really good. I really enjoyed this one a lot, and it's done a fantastic job so far in building up all possible suspects for the murder of the gambler. And we also got a potential tease for a return of an old villain who we haven't seen since season 1. And like I said, we are now 4 episodes in already in season 3, and it's already shaping up to be a really good one. So I'm going to give a quick recap of what's happened so far, and then we're going to get straight into talking about episode 4. So what we've seen so far is Cindy Burham is more or less unofficially joined the JSA, and she's desperate to prove herself to Courtney and all of the others that she's changed and she's seen the error of her ways. And a lot of the members don't really buy into the fact that Cindy Burham has gone straight, which is understandable considering that in season 1 she tried to kill them, and then in season 2 not only tried to kill them again, but she also helped release Eclipso as well. So it's kind of understandable that they wouldn't trust her. And as we saw at the end of episode 1, we saw the gambler gets murdered, and all fingers pointed to Cindy Burham as being the killer. And as we saw in episode 2, the Crocs are a possible suspects for the murder of the gambler because they've been acting very suspicious, and they've been saying things like no one can ever know what's really happened or what we've done. And as we saw at the end of episode 3, we saw Sylvester, aka the original Starman, go back to the scene of the crime, and he was taken out by a mysterious assailant who we didn't actually see, but we heard the sound of roaring, and we pretty much left that episode with Sylvester unconscious in a pool of blood, completely battered and bruised. So far, possible suspects we have are Cindy Burham and the Crocs. I think we can safely write Sylvester off, although not completely because he is still in question. But judging by the way episode 3 ended and the way this episode ended, which we'll talk about as we go along here, I think we can safely say that it's none of the above that I mentioned, that it could be someone completely different, and it looks like it could be that person, which was teased in episode 4, which was a villain who we haven't seen for quite some time now, not since season 1, but more on that in a moment. And also, we saw Cameron finally learn the truth about his icicle powers from his grandparents, and we saw them more or less tell Cameron that it's time he learned about the history of our family. So it looks like we could possibly see Cameron become the new Icicle villain, because we all know his father was Dr. Icicle, so it's possible we could see Cameron become Icicle Jr. or the Icicle, but time will tell really. But that story arc more or less plays a big part in this season, and it looks like they could be possibly setting him up to become the next big main villain, or one of the main villains for season 3. So with that all said, let's not waste any more time. Let's get straight into it. Let's talk about episode 4, Frenemies Chapter 4, The Evidence. So this episode opens up with Cameron, who is more or less trying to learn more about his background as well as his icicle powers, because as we all remember, his grandparents told him at the end of episode 3 that, that he's got the same powers as his father, who was the original Dr. Icicle. So we see him here just walking around looking at all different objects in his cabinet, and he comes across shaker which has a little girl in there who very strongly resembles Courtney Whitmore. So we see here he starts to look at it and he gives it a good shake. And, you know, the interesting thing about Cameron, he's not really a bad person. I think he's just more or less like misguided. So we start to see him testing it out with his ice powers. So we start to see him creating snow inside the shaker. And over the course of the scene, we start to see him developing his ice breath, and we start to see his powers grow more and more and more until eventually the whole shaker is covered in ice. So I thought this opening scene did a really good job in showcasing the development of Cameron's powers as he drops the shaker on the floor and it's all covered in ice. Now, it's interesting to know that, Cameron, as I said, he's not a bad person really, and he doesn't want to hurt anyone, but you can't help but feel that maybe his family are just trying to influence him. So we see his grandparents have arrived, and, they're more or less saying that we're blessed with our grandson, and they're saying that their enemies will have to suffer as well. So it's very interesting that his family are just like taking advantage of his misguidance. So we see his grandparents just more or less take him out of the room. So obviously they're going to teach him how to use his powers. So this was actually a really good opening scene here. And I don't know really, it's hard to tell whether or not Cameron's going to become a villain or not, but time will tell really. But I like where they're going with him, so we're off to a good start with him. I don't think he'll become a villain, but it would be interesting to see if he does or not. So we see the cosmic staff wakes up Courtney. Now, this more or less picks up where we left off from the end of episode 3, where Sylvester got attacked by an unknown assailant. It's quite amusing. You're seeing the staff has a mind of its own. It's almost like I don't know, really, like an energy dog. He's like, wake up, but he doesn't actually bark. So it's quite interesting to see that. And we see the staff whisks Courtney away to the scene of the crime where the gambler was murdered. And we see, Courtney has found Sylvester laying in a pool of blood, battered and bruised, after being attacked. So, like I said, this more or less just picks up where we left off from the end of episode 3. So we see the staff just flying around and finds, as I said, Sylvester unconscious. It's quite interesting because, I always said, like in the last episode, I thought maybe Sylvester was the one who killed the gambler, but it doesn't look like it is him. But it doesn't completely let him off the hook. But it is interesting, how this season is playing out. One minute you think it's this person, then the next thing they throw you off and said, oh, it could be this person. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this is all going to play out. And so far, I'm really enjoying what they're doing here. So we see Sylvester is in hospital, and we see Beth's mum tell Pat and Courtney that she made up a story that Sylvester was hit by a car, because as we all know that Beth's parents are in on the secret now. They know Beth is the new Dr. Midnight, and so far, they've been all like blown away by the fact their daughter is now a superhero, but they now realise that there's more to being a hero than just fun and games and saving the world, that there are some serious moments in this line of duty. So I like the little bit of character development here for Beth's parents. So I think that's quite cool that they're doing that here. So we also see in this episode Yolanda, her parents are not the most easiest people to get along with, but Yolanda's really grown into quite possibly my favourite character of the JSA. I love Courtney, don't get me wrong, but I think Wildcat's probably my favourite. I love Yolanda. I think she's an awesome character, and I think she's definitely had the best developments on the show so far out of all of the other characters. So as we move along here, we see Chuck has visited his old friend in hospital, and we see Pat is there as well, and we see Courtney is there as well. And while all of this is going on in the Blue Valley Hospital, we see someone is watching from the monitor. Now, my suspicion is it's possible it could be Mr. Bones, who was teased at the end of the season 2 finale. Maybe he's behind all of this, but we don't actually know it is Mr. Bones yet. But, you know, the fact that there's someone very mysterious watching all of this going on leads me to believe that although Mr. Bones may not be the suspect who killed the gambler, I strongly believe that he could be the one pulling the trigger. And we also see the JSA, along with Cindy Burham, investigate the crime scene where Sylvester was attacked, and they come across a speck of DNA that doesn't belong to a human. So it's possible we could be getting our suspect here. We don't know who, but it's possible it could be someone who we haven't seen since season 1. And also, as we go along here, it looks like the person who attacked Sylvester is the Dragon King, aka Cindy Burham's dad, who we last saw in season 1. Now, the Dragon King was basically the main guy of the Injustice Society. So his real name is Shiro Ito, who is Cindy Burham's dad. So it looks like it's possible it could be him. So it would make sense because, you know, we did hear roaring at the end of the last episode. So all fingers do point to Cindy Burham's dad. So be cool if it was him, though. But we also see here that Cindy has her own secret. We see her in a lot of pain, and we see Cindy constantly holding her arm while she's in a laboratory. And, you know, we've been seeing Cindy in this lab quite a lot. So it looks like she's been probably performing like a series of experiments on herself, you know. So it's very hard to say exactly what's really going on with her. But she's been acting very suspicious, and we see her eyes briefly flash. So obviously there's some sort of semi-transformation going on here. And we also see in this episode, we see Cameron finally reveals to Courtney the truth about his ice powers, as he says he is going to quit his art class. Now, we've been seeing Cameron, he's been acting, no pun intended, very cold towards Courtney, and this little story arc, I wouldn't say paid off, but it kind of took a shift. So we see Cameron turns the entire art classroom into like a crystalline icicle sort of room with lots of shards of ice everywhere. So Courtney now knows the truth about Cameron's icicle powers, and it's very interesting to see where exactly they'll take this story arc, because we've been seeing over the course of 2 seasons now that Courtney and Cameron have been having this will they, won't they sort of scenario, but it looks like we're finally going to see this actually get paid off. So I'm interested to see how that's going to play out here. And obviously Cameron doesn't know that Courtney is Stargirl, nor does he know that Icicle was murdered by Yolanda. So it's going to be very interesting to see how all of this is going to play out, really. But so far, I'm loving it. And we see Pat presents Sylvester his old Stargirl uniform, which I thought was a nice moment here. So it looks like we might be starting to see some of the older JSA members working alongside the younger JSA members. So that's quite a nice treat as well. And we see here Cameron and Courtney walk to the park, and we see Courtney showing Cameron how to control his ice powers better by more or less trying to channel in happy memories and things that make him, more comfortable. And we see the whole park turn into like this winter wonderland. And I thought that was a really nice scene as well. And we finally see Cameron and Courtney have their first real kiss. And we also see, towards the end of this episode, we see Cindy Berman in her laboratory again in agonizing pain, and alluding to a scene earlier where Beth said that DNA isn't human and the skin just peels itself off. And we see Cindy more or less like pulls down the shoulder of her top, and we see her skin start to show more of a reptilian sort of skin. So that's quite a very chilling way to end episode 4. And that's how we end episode 4, Frenemies Chapter 4, The Evidence. Overall, I thought this was a fantastic episode, a great continuation and follow-up from episode 3. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see how this is all going to play out. But there wasn't really a lot of action in this episode, but I felt it was still great. Sometimes with episodes, you don't always need constant action. Obviously, action is very important, but I feel, if you've got good dialogue and a great story, the rest will take care of itself. So I thought this did a great job. As I said, there wasn't a lot of action. It was a bit more thinking, a bit more keeping an eye on things, pointing out little clues here and there. But as I said, I like the direction they've taken for season 3. This is much more of a murder mystery / detective story where the JSA are all using their heads to try and solve this mystery. And I really liked it. So I thought they did a really good job here. And so far, I'm absolutely enjoying season 3. So that's going to be it from me. I am going to wrap this up now. What was your thoughts on episode 4? Did you enjoy it? What's your reaction to Courtney learning the truth about Cameron having icicle powers? How do you think this is going to play out? Do you think Courtney will tell the rest of the JSA about Cameron's powers? Do you think Courtney and Cameron will now be a couple, now that they've had their first official kiss? Or do you think Cameron could still turn into the new icicle? And also, what about Dragon King? Where does he fit into all of this? Is he the one who killed the gambler? Or is it his daughter, Cindy? Is it possible she could be the next Dragon Queen, shall we say? And also, what about Sylvester? Where does he fit into all of this? Is he the suspect? Is he the killer? And also, now that he's Starman again, where does this fit in with the whole cosmic star thing? Will he have control of it again, or will Courtney maintain control of it? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Stargirl Season 3 review series, where I am going to be talking about Episode 5, which I am very much looking forward to talking about, especially with the way this episode not only ended, but the way this episode played out, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next in Episode 5, and it should definitely be a good one. So, until next time, take care, everybody, and stay safe, and once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.